You're listening to Adoptees On, the podcast where adoptees discuss the adoption experience. I'm your host, Haley Radke, and this is a special episode in our healing series where I interview therapists who are also adoptees themselves so they know from personal experience what it feels like to be an adoptee. Today, we are continuing last week's conversation about estrangement. Let's listen in. I'm so pleased to welcome back to Adoptees On, Pam Cordano. Welcome back, Pam.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi.
You and hi to everybody. Hi.
So I gave you a hard time last time. We're probably still going to talk about hard things.
Probably, since the subject is hard.
Yeah. So we are talking about estrangement. And last time we talked about, some of the deeper rooted causes for estrangement, why we would choose that, why sometimes it's our adoptive parents that choose that on our behalf. And so I want to continue that conversation. And one of the things you mentioned was that you had a 2-year estrangement from your adoptive parents.
Mm-hmm.
And what made you decide to go back and reconnect? How did that kind of happen for you?
Well, I had really good reasons for choosing the estrangement. And my reasons were good enough that they could have lasted for the rest of my parents' lives. I had enough reason to have a permanent estrangement with my adoptive parents. But the truth is, it cost me a lot. For me personally, like being in a state of estrangement with them cost me a lot. It wasn't so hard with my dad. He wasn't much of a parent to me, and I hated him. But my mom was a mixed bag, and she required a lot. It was hard to be her daughter in a lot of ways. It was exhausting in a lot of ways. But she also, there was kind of generosity she also gave me. And like I mentioned in our last session, I was bonded to her in a certain way. I came to them when I was 6 months old, and she kept me alive, So there was something there in me that was attached to her. And I remember being estranged for those 2 years, and I hated that I was so uncomfortable being apart, being that far apart from them. I was like two people at once. And I think that's often how adoptees feel like there's two or more parts of us that are in a terrible kind of competition. So the older principled part of me was like, I have every right to not be in a relationship with these people. And with my mom, it was because she was still in a relationship with my dad. Like that what he had done wasn't so bad for her that she would leave him. So in my mind, she was betraying me. So there's that part of me that felt older and more in my head, like more like principled, like in my mind, But at this very deep, young core part of me, it was kind of unbearable to have made a break like that with them. It's like in that place where there isn't language. It's like the younger than language place where the part of me that didn't have the language even for arguments, but just felt lost and alone and frightened and untethered. Like I already was aware I was untethered from my biological family, but then untethered from the only people that I had any kind of family relationship with. I had my mom and my dad, my adoptive parents, and me, the only child. And my mom and dad were both only children also. So I didn't have aunts or uncles or cousins or anybody. So I was on this planet alone with no family. They were my only family. So there was something I felt inside of me that felt like it was really hard to be estranged. So I did a lot of therapy in those 2 years, and I worked really hard, and I grew, but I also at some point realized, okay, fine, I want my mom back in some limited capacity, and he comes with the package. So I'm not going to expect. I got more grounded in what can I really expect from either of them. My dad, nothing. My mom, not much. So that's where I was more prepared to go back into a limited kind of relationship, because it was what I had expected things to be right, that it didn't work out, and they weren't going to be right. So I made a decision to go back in where things were not right, and they were not going to be right, but I still wanted a limited kind of relationship with them. And I don't regret it, which is good to know.
So you had a period of 2 years where you were fully estranged, and then for the rest of their lives, did you stay in relationship with them?
In a limited way.
Limited way. So here's a comment. I mentioned before at our last episode that I had asked listeners to sort of give me some comments on if they had ever considered estrangement from their adoptive families. And so here's another note from a listener. I have a superficial relationship with my adoptive parents. We have long periods of silence, sometimes years. I've grown to accept it for what it is now. And I'm okay with, quote, playing along, end quote, for their ego's sake. So when you're talking about your relationship and seeing other adoptees who do stay in relationship, and what's your experience on something like this? Saying that you have a superficial relationship, like it sounds like this person is doing that to protect themselves in some fashion.
Right. And so was I. I think that for all of us, I think with everybody in our lives, getting clear on what's actually a reality and really what's actually possible and what isn't is fundamental. Because if we're confused about what's possible, like for me to try to get my dad to take some responsibility in the breakdown of our relationship from my infancy, which he held me responsible for, I'm just going to be like exhausting myself, frustrating myself. I'm going to be like out of touch with reality. He's not going to do that. He's not going to get it. And then trying to get my mom to get it in her role in the whole thing, she's not going to get it. So I had to really, before I could reunite with them, I had to really get clear on what was not possible, so that then I could only relate where things were possible. And I think a lot of times that's what we call superficial relationships, is where we only a limited amount is really possible in a relationship. And so that's where we stay, because the cost of a full estrangement sometimes is too hard. Other times it's the only thing that's going to work. But
well, you expressed this to me before, and I don't think we were on record then, but that something needed to change. And if it wasn't going to be the adoptive parents' perspective, actions, behavior, all that, then it has to be us, and we have to change. And so what does that mean?
Yeah, that really is about getting clear on what really is and isn't possible. Like if our parents or families, if anybody in our lives lacks capacity in some way, it really helps us to get clear that that's just the case. And then we can make new decisions about that.
Yeah. So I guess I have this quote, the superficial relationship. I have someone else that said, which I thought was really profound, actually. I'm in contact with my adoptive parents, but I'm emotionally estranged. Thought, man, that's a good line. Emotionally estranged. And so, I mean, we said with the buzzword, right, is we always say like the boundaries. So if you're still choosing to be in relationship, but it's only going to be safe for me and look like this for me, like a certain way, is if I don't know, if I only allow them access to my external life and not my internal feelings, etc.
Right.
And I have lots of experience. Here's what I'll share about my personal experience. My psychologists have coached me for many, many years in relationships with all kinds of people, saying at which level are people in which circle of your life, right? And like the outside, you're only sharing what's the weather like with these people in the big circle. And then your smallest circle, your inner safe people, they can know that inner life for us, our feelings and thoughts, and like the true Haley, right? So looking at those circles. So I think, is that what you're kind of getting at? Like that knowledge of which level of circle can you safely be in with your adoptive parents?
Right. And I think the process of figuring that out can be complicated. Like I know a lot of adoptees who just keep hitting their head against the same wall, just trying to get their adoptive parents to change, like, and get it. So I wanted my mom to protect me from my dad, from his rage and from his rejection and from his meanness. And from the time I was 4, I can remember arguing with my adoptive mom to protect me from my dad. Like, and I was just angry with her all the time and telling her what she should have said, what she should have done, what she's not doing right all the time. And to keep doing that was awful. But as I got to be an adult, it was better at some level than just stopping the madness and feeling the truth. And the truth is, I grew up with a scary, enraged man who didn't protect me, and with a woman who chose him over me in these situations. And what did that feel like? Well, that felt like terrifying and all these terrible things. That's the feeling that's going to get me out of the repetitive pattern of trying to get her to do this thing that she's never done. So when you talked about this, the circles of who can you have close in and who can you have kind of in and more further out, when we have confusion about that, we have the wrong people too close in and the right people too far out. To get clear on where people really belong relative to us, if we keep repeating a pattern over and over again, probably we could stop and maybe with the help of a therapist, go in and feel what the problem actually feels like. And by feeling that problem, this goes back to the end of our last conversation, by really feeling the place that we're suffering and that we've been suffering and that we don't know what to do about it, and the helplessness of all of that and the grief and everything else, that is like a doorway into the power of a new decision. Then we could have different boundaries that we could actually uphold or maintain because we're not avoiding this awful feeling. We've discovered that we can feel it and we can come through it in some other way.
I think, gosh, it's so easy for me to be the adoptee and to be pointing at the other people to change and coming back to, well, most people don't change. That's kind of just the reality. Just in general, in life, most people stay stagnant. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't say that's true of my listeners because a lot of you I know are in therapy and are working on things, and you are constantly sort of moving forward. And so then when we're in relationship with people who aren't doing that and are staying stagnant, coming back to like, okay, well, I guess my next thing is strengthening my own person and being in a place where it does feel safe that I can hold those boundaries. And I think what I've heard from adoptees, it's like, I'm so busy working on who I really am. I don't have the capacity to be holding those boundaries to protect myself. So that's when the relationship is just off the table. It's not a safe thing.
Yeah. But the cool thing, I loved how you said strengthening my person, because the cool thing about when we strengthen our person, then we can better support estrangement that feels right to us. And we can better support not estrangement if that feels right to us. If we can really direct traffic more clearly from that hard work of strengthening our person.
Here's a couple more notes from people. I'm not estranged, but I have limited contact. So that felt good to them. And another said, I'm completely estranged. It was my choice, and I've never felt more free. And then a third, I haven't considered estrangement. They're not perfect, but they're trainable. When I tell you I cackled when I first read that one, I was like, they're trainable. And then the last one I'm going to share is I am distant from both my adoptive parents and bio family because I need space to grow my own family and to be myself. Aren't those all kind of expressions of the same sort of thing? Like all of them.
Right. What makes me so excited is when I see adoptees filling out the space of who they are, whatever that means, whether they're full of passion about something or whether they're full of rage about something or hope or grief. Like when I see adoptees filling out their own space and being more fully who they are, then I just feel like they're on the right track. That's when they're on the right track. And we can feel it when we're around people who we want to shrivel in, we want to go into hiding and put on a false face and speak with a false voice and say false things and say yes when we mean no, say no when we mean yes. And we feel what that feels like. And it's like this shrinking in. And that's what I like. Ann Heffer and I are teaching these Flourish classes twice a week. We have got over 50 adoptees all together in these classes. And that is such a theme of adoptees just taking up space and risking saying things and verbalizing things, finding their own voice that's going to be supported and not offensive or hurtful or, wrong and bad somehow.
So I know we are all in very different spots, but can you kind of teach us a little bit on when would we know if we are already estranged, when would we know that we could reconnect, if that should even be on the table? And then when or what are some things that we could see that's like, this is a no-go zone. Like, this is never going to work. Can you speak to that a little bit? I know it's not like, I don't want it to be prescriptive. And because we're all in so many very unique situations, I know this will be kind of high level, but maybe some questions we could kind of ask ourselves to assess, to kind of figure that out.
Well, let's see. The people I know who are estranged felt so sick from their interactions. It was like drinking poison. So sick, like more sick than they could tolerate and bear. So sick that when they would get off the phone or get away from an in-person meeting, they would have to recover, and it would be hard to do the daily functioning of their lives, like really sick. So, and different things make us feel sick differently. But so I think that if you're feeling, you meaning listeners are feeling that the cost of a phone conversation or of an in-person time together is just so terrible to their systems, to your systems. And if you find yourself just wanting to cancel every time you get together with or talk to anybody, or making up excuses saying you're sick when you're not, or whatever, and it just may be something to think about. Either more boundaries need to be put into place, and maybe you need a therapist to help you do that, and figure that out, and how to verbalize it, and how to work with your particular parent so that you can verbalize it in a way that's actually effective and gets through and maybe minimizes drama. But also, sometimes people just know, like, the only way to save myself is to get completely out. And there's I think there's a knowing there, and it isn't necessarily an objective situation. Like, well, if this and that and this and that, then definitely get out. It's not external, it's internal. And we know that point where it's like, okay, either we're going to die in this situation, we're going to get sick, we're going to whatever, or we have to get out to save ourselves. And then you asked about getting back, like, how do we know when to get back? And sometimes if we're doing our own work during an estranged period, and we start to feel a shift in us, like, you know what, I think if she does that again, I think I could handle it. If he does this or doesn't do that, I think I could handle it differently. Maybe it's worth checking out. Like, if there starts to be an openness inside of us, that's a sign. Or if they're also doing their work, they're writing letters and saying, like, look, we're thinking about this differently. We're seeing a therapist. We're thinking about what you've said. We're understanding you differently. We're not all the way there yet, but we'd really like to open up some communication, even if it's in the form of letter writing or, some kind of compromise. Then you've got people who are willing to go through some pain to grow and change and open to reunite with you. So that's something. Maybe it depends on the family, of course, but that's something. So externally, there might be some signs that there's some work is being done and that there's a devotion in place that might be worth revisiting, maybe only in a therapist's office or with a third party or something, or maybe very slowly. Like slow is good. Slow is really good.
So on purpose, I chose, based on request from listeners, like many, many multiple requests, can you talk about estrangement from adoptive parents? So on purpose, this series was about that. And we've covered so many times about reunions breaking down with first families, like so many times. And so it's like, I kind of have a handle on that. Like, guys, do it slow. It can be a roller coaster. It's all the like ups and downs. So to hear you like flip it with adoptive parents, like the reconnection, it's just like, we know a lot of these things and yet it just feels like such a different angle. I don't know. That's kind of what's kind of going through my head.
It's true. It is a different angle, huh? But so similar, but so different at the same time. Some ways easier, in some ways harder, it seems. Meaning we can easily make this case. Like, well, we're not even related to you anyway, so who cares? Like, I can just, it's like, this is all a lie. You know, I've heard people say that. That may make it easier. But the harder part is there was some measure of bonding when we were too little to even have a choice about it, because we had needs and they met our needs enough that we're still alive. So that's in place inside of our bodies as a thing that we don't have that with our biological families the same way.
And for so many of us that did grow up in, the average, safe-ish, like normal kind of home, quote unquote, those people are the keepers of our memories as well, right? They have the pictures and the family home videos and all those kind of things of our childhood. So sometimes estrangement can bring out a feeling of loss of all those, like even like physical artifacts. And I don't know, especially when you're searching for identity, you're like, you want to
I'll take anything.
Yes, cling on to that. So gosh, so many layers to this. I appreciate so much. You've given us so many good insights. Is there anything that I didn't ask you about you really think we need to hear? Anything else? And again, it's not, I don't want to be like, okay, estrangement is like the right thing to do or it's wrong and you really should try and be reconnecting. Like, it's not meant to be that. We're really just kind of talking about this so you're not alone. So we're making wise choices. So we're not stuffing the feelings down, even though I really like to do that. Anything else?
The last thought I have is that it's terribly uncomfortable, but also possibly also real and true, that when we are estranged or partially estranged or emotionally estranged, neither side feels comfortable. It isn't that estrangement feels good per se. It's just that it feels less bad than being in a fuller relationship or in a relationship or a fuller relationship. So it's living with this. That's part of the cost of coming out of the fog, right? It's like this feeling that for maybe a long time, sometimes, that nothing really feels comfortable. So I think sometimes, well, when I was in my 20s or 30s, who I was at that time, I might have wanted to feel good in estrangement. Like, I tried to feel good during my 2-year estrangement, like, have it be kind of black and white in that way. But the truth is it didn't feel good, but it was for those 2 years until it wasn't better than being in a relationship. So I think we have to be prepared to have both sides be uncomfortable in and out. Just, again, to be, it's the same theme, Haley. It's the same theme of being, because the thing is, if we think we're going to feel good when we're finally estranged, then we could be surprised by sudden terrible feelings and then feel
Sorry,
really like
I just think you're in for a rude awakening.
yeah, you're in for a rude awakening. And yeah, and sometimes I guess the boat has to rock a while, right? Like, yeah, phew, I'm so glad, I'm out of that mess. Finally, I'm gonna have a party. I'm gonna get a cake, and make it my anti-adoption cake or something. And then it's like the boat rocks the other way. Like, oh my God, it's Tuesday, 8 a.m. and I'm drunk and I've called in sick and I'm just, it's like the boat it can like, what happened? And then the boat rocks again. And I'm just saying, like, it's been hard for me that neither side feels good. Even with my parents dying and the relief I felt, it still doesn't feel good because I still went through it all. So it's hard, right? I like feeling good, Haley. I do. I'm not, but I'm just saying. I also don't like the sneak attack of like, I thought I had this. I thought it was solid, and then oh my gosh, here I am not solid again.
Well, Pam, you all know Pam loves to talk about how you feel in your body. Okay. And when I say my stomach has been churning and
Oh my gosh.
it's true. It's always coming back. It's always, if you don't deal with it, it's always coming back. So Thank you for challenging us.
Next time, why don't you have me on the show with a light topic? Let's do a light one next.
Well, I mean, I can give you some behind the scenes secrets. I can do that. I have been considering how do we have a show that's all jokes? We don't like people making adoption jokes, but like, adoptees, like, let's tell our own jokes. I don't know. It's been on the whiteboard for a long time because I don't know how to do that. But
that's a great one. I love it.
There you go. Next time, Pam will be back and telling us some jokes. So good. Where can we connect with you online so we can learn more from you? And please also tell us about your book.
You can find me at my website, pamcordano.com. And my book is called 10 Foundations for a Meaningful Life, No Matter What's Happened. And I published it last January. So it's a year old and a year and a month. And yeah, that's been a fun journey for sure.
Thank you for walking us through this, even though it's hard.
Thanks for having me. I've been able to see your face during this conversation and the cringes and yeah.
Hey,
I know.
Don't sell me out. It's okay. It's okay.
Listen, poker face.
You guys, it's the whole thing. There's all the feelings. So you're listening to this and having heard feelings. I'm with you. Gosh, I'm so thankful for the therapists that come and show up for us and give us so many interesting things to talk about, think about, even if they're hard, even if they're asking us to do hard things. I think it's so important. So thank you so much, Pam, and the other therapists who have been on the healing series. I really appreciate it, like, deeply. They've taught me so much. And, sometimes when I'm re-listening to make notes to give to my editor, I'm just like, man, was I there? Because I feel like I'm learning this all over again. So I understand why some of you download these episodes a few times to re-listen. I get it. Me too. I just want to ask a favor of you today. If you know of an adoptee who has been experiencing some challenges in relationship with their adoptive parents, I wonder if you would share these 2 healing series episodes on estrangement with them. And again, it's not a comment on you should break up with your parents. It's not that. It's like looking at what is healthy for us and what can we do to heal a relationship, or when do we need to know when it's not the time. So if you know someone that's been kind of struggling with that, I think this would be really helpful to share with someone like that. So if you think of that person in your head, maybe as I was talking, you're like, oh my gosh, I know exactly who I should share this with. And then you can teach them how to download a podcast. Not everybody knows how, and you know how. So if you are able to kind of show them where they can listen, the podcast is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, any podcast app people like to use. You should be able to find it there, searching Adoptees On. It's also on YouTube, and there's no video, but sometimes just sending a link to a YouTube video is easy if someone is not used to downloading a podcast in an app. So you can find it there as well. And yeah, I'm so thankful for those of you who share the show on social media or however you do it, with one-on-one with a friend or in your adoptee support groups. I hear a lot of you talk about these episodes with your support group and kind of unpack things together, which I think is so smart, so brilliant. I love to unpack some of the things I'm trying to learn when I'm doing these interviews. So thank you for sharing in that way. And you're helping build the community when you do that. So I really appreciate it. That's it. If you want to join Patreon and support the show financially, it's adopteeson.com/partner, has all the details of that. And thanks so much for listening. Let's talk again next Friday.